It was 2009, and an engineer was pitching a car to a room full of senior automobile executives. This car had no engine, no emissions, and no dealerships. There was silence at first, and then he was literally laughed out of the room. This technology is very new, there are no takers for such a car, and you'll go bankrupt, is all he heard. Ladies and gentlemen, that young engineer was Elon Musk. And barely 15 years later, his Tesla is rewriting the rules of the automobile industry, and it is worth more than the next 15 competitors put together. And the people who laughed at him, well, they're busy catching up. We've heard a lot of stories about these mavericks, right? Hundreds of them. Steve Jobs, Richard Branson. And whether you love them or you hate them, one thing is for sure. They broke every rule in the game, and then they rewrote the rules. And this presentation is not about personalities, it's not a motivational speech. It's about patterns and traits that we can take from their lives and apply to ours for a better future. Because I truly believe that the future belongs to the brave. Let's define a maverick before we get into things. What does a maverick mean to you? To me, it means 4 top traits. Vision, to see what others don't. In the late 1800s, when people were barely getting used to telegraph machines, Nikola Tesla was talking about wireless communication. And today, a lot of things that we depend upon, like Wi-Fi or wireless charging, they're all based on his foundational ideas. That man was a visionary. Courage, to stand out from the crowd. In the 1600s, when Galileo said the earth revolves around the sun and not vice versa, he was actually taking on the church. He was inquisitioned and sentenced to house imprisonment for the rest of his life. The price for his courage. Initiative. When Steve Jobs walked out on stage with his iPhone in 2007, the iPhone was much bigger than its competition. It had no keypad, no stylus. In fact, his own team was telling him that you're probably pushing it too far. And we all know what happened to smartphones after iPhone. And lastly, commitment, I think the most important, to keep going when others have long since stopped. 2008 was a particularly bad year for SpaceX. They had seen 3 rocket launch failures of their Falcon 1 rocket. And any sane person like you and me would have said, thank you, and decided to walk away. But not Elon Musk. He was busy betting his last few dollars on the 4th launch of the same rocket. Thankfully for him, that launch was successful. Now that we have defined a maverick, let's look at their contribution to industry and innovation, shall we? There has been a lot of research on mavericks and their contribution to innovation. And let me quote just one, and this is from 2004. This appeared in Harvard Business Review in 2004, and it asked 1,000 professionals in so-called innovative companies as to how often they broke rules. And sadly, only about 18% of them said that they broke rules on a regular basis. But when it came to breakthrough innovation, the same 18% were almost 5 times more likely. Let's talk about 4 of them, only because they are well known, and you probably know all of them. Amazon spends billions of dollars every year on what they call projects with high failure rates, right? With intended failure design. SpaceX, Elon Musk is supposed to have said, if you're not failing, you're not innovating enough. And this is a company that spent hundreds of millions of dollars on exploding rockets. According to research, 73% of employees in companies hold back on some great ideas because of fear. The fear of being judged, the fear of being ridiculed. And you will agree with me that a lot of you are sitting on some ideas as well because of that. Businesses prioritize efficiency over innovation, and they start punishing you for small failures. They might not realize it at first, but they're definitely on the way to irrelevance. Case in point, Kodak. I'm sure most of us know Kodak. They were innovators and probably one of the top companies when it came to photography and photography films. But did you know that they were also the original inventors of the digital camera? And way back in 1975. They shut the lid on the project because they thought the digital camera will eat into their photography film sales. And eventually, when digital cameras became mainstream, Blockbuster was another big company in the US in the late 90s and the early 2000s. You could rent DVDs from them. and they had 9,000 stores across the US. What they failed to notice was the increasing use of internet and online streaming. So much so that when Netflix was offered to them for mere $50 million, they refused to buy Netflix. Today, Netflix is a $150 billion company, and Blockbuster is dead and gone. BlackBerry, they had a whopping 43% market share in mobile phones in 2010. But guess what? They thought smartphones were a passing fad. They shut down. What's to be noted here is none of these companies lacked any resources. They were at the top of their games in their respective markets. But what they lacked was long-term vision and probably the courage to listen to the few dissenting voices within that were telling them that the industry is changing. Today, the world is moving faster than ever before, right? The future used to come at us in decades, and today it comes at us every 3 months. And in this age, I think the worst possible thing that we can do is probably cling to safety and be risk-averse. Maverick thinking is not a luxury anymore. I think it has become an absolute necessity. Am I a maverick? And how do I encourage maverick behavior within me or my teams? Thankfully, we don't have to get on a horse and fight a revolution to be called a maverick anymore, right? All we have to do is raise our hands and start asking questions. Ask lots of questions. And some of those questions will make us uncomfortable, and I think we have to live with that discomfort. Because let's face it, we all know that a great idea doesn't come from a meeting where everybody agrees. And the last thing, I can bet $1,000 that some of us right here in this room are sitting on some great life-changing ideas. But we are all waiting for that perfect moment to bring it out. Let me tell you that there is no such thing as perfect timing. Every great idea has to go through multiple rounds of revision before it becomes a useful idea. And the best time to start discussing an idea is when it is still imperfect. If you think that this is all theoretical, somehow you can't relate to it, and you don't see yourself becoming a maverick, let me help you relate to it with a short personal story, my story, of how I became a horticulturist from a technologist. And as I narrate the story, let's see if you can pick out those traits that I just talked about. It was 2010, and I was an IT consultant doing fairly well for myself. And then I read a book that inspired me to go back to my roots and become a farmer. I did the next logical thing. I pooled all my savings and I bought a struggling farm and figure there. And when I proudly showcased my farm to my relatives and friends, all I heard from them was, "You've thrown away good money on this." I saw a green, productive farm, right? And that vision kept me going for the next few years. Then started the long, arduous process of self-learning. As an engineer with zero agriculture knowledge, that meant hours and hours of YouTube videos, online research, visiting farmers, learning from them firsthand, and then applying it to my own farm. And then started the series of experiments. I have lost count of the number of failed experiments, heartbreaks that I've gone through. But then once in a while there was a successful experiment that gave me confidence and that gave me the knowledge that I needed. Where I was a decent natural farmer, and then ambition took over. I wanted to grow vegetables in a polyhouse. And again, another series of experiments started. We tried hydroponics, we tried soil-based organic farming, and finally got to a point where I could grow vegetables at a commercial scale. And when I successfully did that, life threw the next challenge at me. It said, "Where are you going to sell the produce?" For that, an IT colleague and I, we started a company. It was one of the pioneering farm-to-fork companies in Bangalore back in 2018. And we decided to sell our produce directly to end consumers. We used to take orders on WhatsApp. Once we gained experience in horticulture and agribusiness, we then started teaching others how to grow their own vegetables. The cherry on top came in 2019 when we were invited to a conference of tomato and capsicum growers. That is what you see in the last photo. It's the Asian Solanaceous Round Table. And we were invited to talk in front of agricultural graduates, agricultural scientists, and seed businesses. And when I stood there on stage as the lone engineer in the entire room, talking to agri graduates, it was definitely a proud moment for me. It had taken 10 years. Thank you. It had taken me 10 years of rigorous experimentation, multiple failures, multiple discussions with experts to get to that point. Why did I state that story? Well, if I think an ordinary engineer like myself with zero agricultural background can become a somewhat successful horticulturist, nothing stops you from becoming a maverick yourself by following those principles. Have a vision, have courage, have commitment to your goals, and learn to accept failure. With that, let me leave you all with a parting question. If you were 70% sure that your idea would work, but following that idea would make you highly unpopular at work, would you have the courage to follow that idea? That's my time. Thank you.